How's going, guys? It's me, a fool that is recording a should you pull video when I'm having a fever and a cold and all these stuff hitting me all at once. So if you find that I sound a bit odd today, that's probably because why. And they just announced chapter 14. So obviously I am here to talk about should you pull this banner or not. And before all of you go down to the comments and be like, oh, obviously we know we have to pull this banner, blah, 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 blah. You trash of a video. I get that. I understand that. This video is always about why you should pull or not about just, oh, yes or no. But obviously we all know the answer is a yes, and we'll talk about why exactly that is. Before we actually go into the operators though, there's actually a thing I have to mention. It's just that usually I want to go through as many details as I possibly can with each of these operators. But sadly, I really can't do that this time around. I try to give as much as I can in like a as short period of a time as I possibly can, but it's like usually 30 minutes is a limit to where my video can go. And if I were really to go through all of the details, I tried to write a script, by the way, and it ended up being that just the logos part alone was like 5,000 words. It's like writing a freaking essay. So I ditched that plan and I'm just gonna go simple but quick and just gonna go through majority of like the key points that you want to get, but when it comes to the details, you'll have to do a bit more study yourself and comprehend a bit if you can. Alrighty, let us get into the operators. And let's take a look at Logos first, because he's actually one of the operators that I would highly recommend everyone to pull. And obviously there's two operators, so you just wanted to pull both of them. But Logos is a core caster, just like AFL, and as you can see, in my case, I have M3 all three of his skills and module level 3. What I would think most players would need is skill 3 M3 or skill 1 and skill 3 M3 plus module level 3. Module level 3 is a must. Skill 3 and skill 1, that's mostly up to your playstyle. I would highly recommend just everyone to get M3 skill 3, but skill 1, it's not really a must in my opinion, because you can depend on if you want to do AFK strats. It's mostly a AFK only kind of skill. So let's take a look at his module first, and I'll explain why I think module level 3 is a must. So as per usual, the trait is just dealing arts damage for core casters. But for him, module level 1 brings 8% of his arts attack arts damage. So that's after resistance. 8% of that will also be dealt as necrosis damage. So obviously he can deal like necrosis burst and all that depending on how much of the arts damage actually applies. So it's actually really related to resistance. That's really interesting, and we'll have to talk further about that later, especially how it can work with his skills. So his first talent, whenever he attacks a target, there's a 60% chance that he will deal an extra damage, like a extra projectile, towards a random target within his attack range, dealing up to 60% or 65% if you have potential of his attack as art damage, and slow them for 0.8 seconds. So yes, this skill does, this talent does have a bit of control in it. If that target just happens to be in necrosis burst period, then he will deal an extra 60% of his attack as elemental damage. So in this current state of the game, it's basically the same as true damage. And this is where like module really comes in, because that extra 60% of his attack as elemental damage is so huge, like how much, when it comes to how much damage he can deal. So yeah, this is actually the reason that I would highly recommend everyone to get module level 3. And his second talent is that whenever he attacks a target, no matter if it hits or not, there's a 5-second duration where the enemy will have -10 resistance, and they will take 150 more or up to 165 more arts damage. This extra arts damage does not get affected by resistance, so it is just a flat number. So this talent works really great for basically any arts damage operators, and especially if those that have really high frequency damage, like a Volcano, Chobai skill 3, Texas Alter skill 2, all that good stuff. And if you're following up with the newest CN news, you know, there's a certain new operator that can deal really high frequency arts damage. That also works really well. So not only is he a good damage operator, he also works as well as a team. He's got like good synergy when it comes to arts damage. Really good. Now, let's take a look at his skills. So, Logo skill 1 will increase his attack area into your normal fast shooter. So just like Exia, it will increase his attack by 100%. Whenever there's an enemy in his attack range that has lower than 150% of his attack, that enemy will immediately die and deal the equivalent amount of that enemy's HP as arcs damage to another target within that area. And then you can see how this chain, like domino effect, happens, right? When there's so many enemies just coming in, one dies and then immediately will hit the next one and then the next one, and eventually they just all die. The duration is infinite. This means that this is a great AFK skill. In fact, this is actually like the new tier of like AFK skills, because at this like level of attack, you're basically looking at any enemy with lower than 2500 HP will instantly die. And you can also buff this skill with any like attack buff, like you can do Skadi Alter skill 2, you can do AFL talent. Any increase towards his base attack will also increase the line where he can instantly kill enemies. So if there's like a lot of mechanics where, like, you know, boss will summon a lot of mobs, those he can easily deal with. And if a boss actually summons a lot around themselves and they're all in Logos' attack range, he will just like instantly burst out tons of damage, because all the summons will just keep dying, and then the equivalent amount of their HP will just all be dealt to the boss. So that's like an interesting way that you can use this skill. But yeah, great AFK skill, and highly recommend M3 if you want to do any AFK strat. Second skill. So during the skill duration, Logos will have increase of up to 70 resistance. With his base resistance, you're looking at 890 resistance, I think. Is it 80 or 90? 90 resistance, which is actually just awesome, because you're like, this is basically Nightingale's skill 3, right? That means you can basically ignore any boss that has like arts damage, just outright ignore. So his attack turned into a lock-on attack where he will deal up to 75% of his attack as arts damage once every 0.5 seconds. So yes, this skill is not affected by any attack speed, buff, or debuff. Now, if he keeps attacking the same target, it will gradually increase his damage to 3 times and gradually decrease the movement speed of the enemy to 40%, so minus 60% movement speed. It takes up to 5 seconds of locking onto the enemy to reach the max value for both attack and decreased movement speed. And if the target dies, it will switch to another enemy. So basically what this skill works really well for is dealing with like a single elite or a single boss. And because of how frequent the damage is, it actually works really well with his talent 1 and talent 2 of like frequent 150 or 165 arts damage, like just outright damage, and also the extra projectile that is like 60% chance. That is also a great increase when it comes to the total amount of damage. And the good thing also is, like I mentioned, his attack isn't affected by attack speed at all. So that means if there's like, you know, those black fogs or like enemy mechanics that can decrease your attack speed, he can just outright ignore those, which is really nice. And I know CC is dead, but if there is a CC coming in the future that will decrease our attack speed, he can also just ignore that as well. So actually kind of interesting of his skills. So if you have the extra resources, actually consider M3 it. I think it's gonna be worth it down the road. It's pretty fun. So last skill, this is the critical skill. This is so good. So he would have, during skill 3, his attack area will greatly increase and increase attack by 300%. And he will also attack 4 targets at the same time. Whenever the enemy's projectiles goes into his attack range, it will greatly decrease their movement speed. And when the skill ends, any projectile that is still within his attack area will be removed. Now, let's talk about the projectile effect first. It's kind of an interesting skill, but I would say that this is more for show instead of something that you should really focus at, because of how great the damage aspect of this skill is. So I know that there's going to be a lot of videos showing how you can, Tallulah Fire Rain completely removed. That is a really rare case. That's first thing. Second of all, not every single enemy projectile that looks like a projectile is an actual enemy projectile in the coding base. So, and not all of the enemies type of attack can see as a non-projectile. Like, it's really convoluted because there are sometimes enemies that will come charging in at you and just hit you. Like those enemies, there's like this gear looking enemy that can be spawned by those drones, remember? And those guys will actually just turn into an projectile, even though it's an enemy that you can attack before it starts attacking you. But the moment it starts attacking you, it becomes a projectile that can be slowed. Now, on the other hand, if there's like those enemy fireballs that will come travel down the path, those actually count as enemy units. So those aren't projectiles and you can't slow them down. It gets really complicated, and like this whole thing is just really complicated, and I don't really think it's that big of a deal compared to his damage. So basically, if I were to describe his damage potential, I will say this. This is high ground Mlinar with arts damage. At skill 3, M3, and all the modules and all the potentials, you're looking at 120k damage towards 4 targets. And that is including obviously the elemental damage from his talent. But that is also assuming that the enemy will only get Necrosis burst only once. Why that is because most mobs will get 1 burst and they will just be dead. Now, with most bosses, what will happen is, even though they can take more damage, but also most of them just have higher resistance. And when they have higher resistance, because of how the necrosis damage is affected by his enemy's resistance and how much damage he can deal, because of the high resistance, he just deals less necrosis damage, and hence it's hard to reach the 2000 necrosis damage bar to get it to burst. So 12,000 damage towards 4 targets in such a huge area is just great. So that's about it for Logos. I think he's just a great operator in just any mode that you want to bring him into, and you can basically count him as, like, you know, the core operator for IS. If you want to play a caster team, if you want to play in normal event stages, you can just rely on him to just deal with the majority of the enemies, no matter if it's mobs or elite enemies or just bosses. You don't have to care. He just eliminates everything. Basically, Art, Caster, Mlinar. That's as simple as it is. Alrighty, so I hope I've convinced you guys to pull Logos. Let's move on to our next operator. Next up, we have Wis'adel, or W-Alter, or Walter, however you like to call her. And Wis'adel is a 6-star flinger. I'm just going to assume that the majority of us just don't remember what flingers do, so let's just go back to that real quick. So the archetype is so that they don't hit air units, and whenever they attack and in the splash AoE damage, and they also deal an extra layer of AoE damage in the form of a shockwave that only deals 50% of the attack as the normal attack. So there's 2 attacks, one is the 100% and then there's the 50%, 2 layers of AoE. And because of how it's 50% of the attack and it's physical damage, usually it wouldn't really go past through the enemy's defense and just feel like it doesn't really exist. That's kind of the issue with the archetype, but not with Wis'adel. Archetype is the archetype, Wis'adel is Wis'adel. Completely different entities. So let's take a look at that. So as you can see, my Wis'adel here is skill 2 and skill 3 M3 with module level 3. What I would recommend to everyone is skill 3 M3 and module level 3. The only reason I have skill 2 M3 here is purely for the sake of IS, because skill 2 scales way better with IS, but not so much with skill 3. Now, let's take a look at the modules, the module trait to explain why it is so important. So first of all, the trait. So at level 1 of the module, usually there would be 2 layers of attack, right? The normal attack and 1 shockwave. Now it is 3 layers. So 1 normal attack and 2 layers of shockwave. So that is increasing 50% of the potential damage, or a third, depending on how you look at it. So that is already a great addition to her kit. Now, talent 1. Whenever she attacks an enemy, so even though it's AoE damage, there is still a priority target, the main target that she's dealing. So when she's attacking, the attack towards her main target is increased to 125%. Also, she will apply a layer of shadow. Whenever the shadow is affected by Wis'adel's shockwave effect, there's a 15% chance for it to explode, dealing 175% of her attack as physical damage to all surrounding as an explosion and stun them for 1 second. At potential 5, you'll get another 10%, so 185%. So if you're not catching up, if you're not following up right now, currently we have 3 layers of AoE. Normal attack, dealing 100% of her attack as AoE damage, and then 2 layers of shockwave, each dealing 50% of her attack as physical damage. And then there's the explosion, where if the shadow is exploded, it deals an AoE of 175%, and then stun them for a second. So there's 4 AoE damages now: normal, shockwave, shockwave, explode. As you can just remember that. It gets really convoluted. We'll go more into that in the later skills. But yeah, just that already tells you she's kind of broken. Now, her second talent is that whenever she's deployed, she will immediately summon a spirit, let's call it. The spirit is prioritized to go from the closest tiles to her that can be deployed, and then it's from bottom to top. So prioritize the bottom tiles over the higher tiles, and then prioritize the left tiles to the right tiles. So it goes from bottom left, right up, bottom left, bottom right, top left, top right. So if you can just get that, and then if all of those tiles are occupied, then it will go further out, but it has to be within her attack range. And then if the spirit is just directly, so top down, left, right of Wis'adel, she also gets camouflage. So this covers another issue with most snipers, and that's them being really squishy, or just outright any high ground operators. Usually they're really squishy. Wis'adel just be like camouflage, done. So that also shows you how broken she is. Also, these spirits also have their own HP, defense, attack. Yes, they do attack. They do attack once every 3 seconds. So it's an SP system where they will naturally gain SP to 3. And then when they reach 3 SP, they will attack any enemy that is within her attack, in her attack range that does not have shadow. So they will prioritize enemies that doesn't have shadow applied to them. So then the shadow applied will also trigger the explosion from the first talent. That is another layer. Also, these shadows all have up to 777 attack, and they deal that as arc damage. They also have 3,500 HP, 650 defense, and 50 resistance. So you're looking at a defender that has high resistance as a free summon for her. Yes, very balanced. Now we can finally look at her skills. Phew, just going through the talent is already so complicated. Now, her first skill is that her next attack deals 2 extra shockwaves and stun all targets for up to 1.5 seconds. This attack's splash area, so her main normal attack splash area, is slightly increased, and the shockwave attack is increased to 120% of her attack as physical damage, and it's up to down to 2 SP per shot and attack to recover SP. So this is your typical AFK skill, and you wouldn't want to use her skill for AFK because the moment like the spirit dies, it's over, and it's just her standing there alone, which doesn't really do much, to be honest. If you want AFK, there's just other operators that can do AFK as well. I think for her, you're really looking for like the high damage. Now, her second talent is that her attack is increased by 35%. Her attack interval is decreased by up to 0.7. So from the initial 2.1 second attack interval, it's now 1.4. And she can attack 3 enemies at the same time. Now, and then after the 25-second duration, the skill will overcharge and turn into 80% of her attack and into 4 hits at the same time. And this can actually be hitting random targets within her attack area. So previously it's 3 targets all separately. Now it's 4 hits, but attacking random targets. So if there's only 1 enemy, it's 4 towards 1 target. If there's like a lot of enemies, it's just completely random. So this is kind of what Rosmontis feels like. So like low attacks in general, but you got a bunch of them, and hence it's pretty good when you have like a lot of attack buffs that you can like scale this skill up. But if you don't, it's not really that good, because you know the defense is a huge problem when it comes to physical damage. Now, that is basically the 2 easy skills to explain. Last skill, skill 3. The moment you activate this skill, she will immediately summon 2 more spirits that is within her attack range. There can be at most 3, and when the skill is over, these spirits are kept. You heard me right. 3 defenders, all dealing 777 arts damage once every 3 seconds. And the thing about that is also, whenever they kill, like whenever they use the skill, they gain 1 to 2, or when they kill an enemy, they gain 1 to 2 SP, 0 to 2 SP. So it actually randomizes them. So not all of them are attacking at the same time, and hence you can have more chance to apply more shadows to more enemies. Now, the interesting thing also is that she has 2 layers of increased attack. As you can see, there is an attack plus 180%. Her attack interval is greatly increased by 2.9 seconds. So her attack interval now is 5 seconds. But this is actually good because it gives more time for the spirits to apply shadows to more enemies within her attack area. And then when she attacks, her attack is further increased to 220%. So she already has plus 180%. And then multiply that by 2.2. And then the splash area of her attack is greatly increased to a radius of 2.5 tiles. You heard me right. 2.5. 5 tiles diameter splash area. And the chance of the first talent activated is increased to 100%, which means it will always explode whenever there is an enemy within her attack area, like her area that has any shadow in it. How crazy is that? Let me explain. So first of all, when it comes to the splash area, if you can't really tell how big 5 tiles when it comes to diameter, think of the chapter 10 Londinium secondary defense artillery thing. So the cannon that will just basically one-shot any of your like squishier operators. That area, and the main target that she hits with her skill 3, throughout the 6 ammo that she has, by the way, she can deal 100k damage, assuming there is 1 explosion only, which is never the case because she has 3 spirits, and each of the spirits can apply shadow to each of it, like different enemy. So we're really looking at average about minimum, I would say 2 extra explosives from her first talent. So you're really looking at 130k damage with 6 ammos. Do the math yourself. You're looking at 20,000 damage each shot towards her main target, of course. And then towards the enemies that are beside the main target, you're looking at like maybe 90% of that, but it is still incredibly high damage. So in effect, what will really happen is whenever there is a shadow applied to an enemy, like extra shadow applied, that means 1 more explosion, and that explosion is basically the same as 1 hit from Minar skill 3. And with this skill, which takes about 6 shots over 5 seconds. So you're looking at about 25 seconds to clear out the 6 shots, or a bit more because of the animation. She can do up to, assuming that this whole shadow applying process is just incredibly well done because of how 3 seconds for each shadow to be applied, and there's a 5-second attack interval. And each of the shadows can also, each of the spirits can also gain extra SP whenever they use their, whenever they apply a shadow. So potentially what you're looking at is 230k damage. Max potential, max module, everything. 230k. This is just incredible amount of damage throughout such a long area, because look at her attack range. She can hit 4 tiles away from her while dealing an attack radius of 2.5 tiles. And this is why she is just so broken, and I would highly recommend everyone to pull her. As long as she is on the field, first of all, she has camouflage, so she basically won't die. Huge AoE throughout long reach also means she can just clear out any mobs as long as the skill is activated. And even if the skill does end, right, she has longer reach, she has got huge AoE, so those two are already better than Minar. And then even if the skill ends, she still has the 3 summons with her, which are all dealing damage, and she can still get the Talent 1 explosion happening. So even if the skill is off, she's dealing decent damage. That is just so unfair when it comes to like comparing to other operators. And this is why, like, if you're new to Arknights, all you do is get E2 Myrtle, and you just borrow your friend's E2 Wis'adel, and you can basically beat anything. If you copied homework in the past and you're like, okay, I don't want to copy homework anymore, Wis'adel is your homework. You put her down and you win. This is the new era of Arknights, and she is the one that's creating this new era. That's how simple it is. You don't have to care about which game mode you're in, normal, IS, SSS, you know, RA or CC if it ever comes back. Any of them, she dominates. Now, that being said, I know that everyone will be pulling her because I'm also recommending everyone to pull her. I do not think that you should always bring her with you if you can afford not to. And the reason being is, the moment you bring out Wis'adel, you're not really playing the game anymore. It's like cheating at this point. You're not doing anything anymore. You don't have to do anything anymore. And that kind of, for me, is taking away the fun. So usually I wouldn't say this about an operator, but for a lot of CN players at the moment, it's just that we will actually, even though it's not like, oh, it's a challenge or anything, it's just we would stop ourselves from bringing Wis'adel because she destroys the entire experience of Arknights. That is how broken she is. She literally breaks the game. And it's not like your usual game of, you know, your usual gacha game where, oh, power creep, enemy becomes so strong and you really need this new operator, like this character that can deal with it. No. The game difficulty stays about the same for at least right now in CN. So it's 6 months in after the release of Wis'adel, and she is still just the one and only that can destroy everything on it. And the enemies still stay about the same. It's just Wis'adel that is still broken. So that being said, I hope you guys are convinced that this banner is just so good you want to pull both Logos and Wis'adel. And, you know, there is really no reason not to pull either of them unless you're just stat against strong operators. Then in that case, you do you. And obviously there's the fact that this is a limited banner. So even if you don't want to use them, pull and then let them sit at E1 as the E0 level 1. That is also perfectly fine. That is about it for this video. Please give it a thumbs up and give me your impression on this banner, because I think some of us still don't, like, a lot of the CN community might know that this banner is really broken, but they might not know like exactly how broken this banner is. And after seeing this video, how do you feel about this banner, especially like both of them. I want to hear your opinion on both of the operators, because that is truly what I think is the interesting part, because both of them are OP, just in different ways. And I will see you guys in the next video, which we will be pulling this banner. And hopefully I get a good luck, because I spend way too much pulling Ascalon. Like, that pulling video was really short, but I actually spent 100 pulls on it. I did not realize. I was counting 90, but it was actually 100. I didn't count properly. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one, and have a good day, night, or whatever it is for you. Bye.